Gerard provides English language editing, proofreading, and content creation services to clients across a range of sectors. Following a career in journalism and corporate communications, he also trains and mentors the next generation of journalists through the English for Journalism Professionals course he teaches at the University of Applied Sciences in Vienna. Gerard holds an MA in Russian and French from Trinity College Dublin, and drawing on his experience in public relations for multinational and multilingual companies, where crisis communications and reputational risk management were central to his role, Gerard will highlight the reputational risk facing language professionals and show real-life examples of how to respond effectively in a crisis. More importantly, he will share practical steps you can take to reduce the reputational risk in your own language business. So, Gerard, it's lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Sahila. Great to be here.
Thank you. I'm now going to pass controls over to you, and I will confirm when we can see your slides.
That's great. Thank you very much.
That's great. And if you just want to pop it into presenter mode.
How's that?
That's perfect. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Is it okay to start, or is there anything else, Sahila?
Nope, that's it. Over to you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction, Sahila. And thank you, of course, to CIOL for the invitation to be here. It's a great honor to be part of this conference, and we've had some fantastic presentations already today. Before I start, there are a couple of disclaimers I just want to go through. The first thing is to say that obviously I don't know anything about either your business or your work as a freelancer, so this isn't legal or professional or business advice. If you do need advice on specific issues, then it would be best to go direct to get some professional advice on the points that you need to cover. The second thing is that I work with a number of institutions, but I'm not actually representing any of them. So the points that I'm sharing in this presentation are my own views and perspectives. Okay, right. That's the end of the formalities. We're just going to go through a number of issues in the presentation, and obviously very happy to continue the dialogue afterwards in the Q&A. Brief introduction to reputation management. We're going to talk briefly about social media. I want to run through a couple of incidents with you where reputations have been damaged and what has been done to fix them. And a lot of the presentation is just to give you some initial pointers on reputation management, and particularly around media relations as well. So I hope that's going to give you a good balanced agenda. Sahila has gone through my background. Most of what I'm going to be drawing on is my experience working in First Data, which was a large payment company, a multinational. We operated across 14 European markets. So we had a lot of multilingual, multicultural, multi-market issues that we needed to cover, particularly from a communications and a policy perspective as well. Okay. But before we start talking about reputation management, I'd like to run a scenario by you. Okay. We're going to come back to it a little later on, but this is it. Supposing somebody from the media has noticed your social media posts. You've been to the in-person CIOL conference, you're attending this one, your posts on LinkedIn or whatever social channel you operate on has got the attention of somebody, and you get a call from a radio station or TV station or a podcast to be part of some future discussion. In this case, let's say a morning radio show. You've got a 5-minute slot, and all the information you have is It's between some feature they're going to do on local transport issues, and you're just covering the space between that and the 9 o'clock news. What do you do? Okay, we're going to come back to this a little later on, because this is either going to be a huge opportunity for you to talk about your business and about issues in the language industry, or it's something, you know, that you may not be able to take advantage as much as you might have. Okay, let's get down to a brief introduction to reputation management. And where better to start than William Shakespeare? This is a quote from his play Richard II, which was written in the year 1595. And the quote talks about spotless reputations. And it's interesting that this phrase is used, because it's actually next to impossible to have a spotless reputation, principally because we're not actually in control of it. And a lot of us are far more the painted clay side of things than the spotless reputation, because in many cases, as we're going to find out, control of our reputation is not totally in our hands. And why does it actually matter? Well, let me give you a current example. I do some work with the Swiss Startup Association, and they had a very interesting talk about compliance and governance a couple of months ago. And one of these speakers referenced a study by an organization called SeedBlink. And it was a study about startup companies. And what it showed was that companies who, you know, may have done incredible work getting their product ready for market, may have done incredible work on their business plan, will in fact suffer about a 30% drop, or would be asked for a 30% discount in any investment that they are asked for if they don't have their governance up to scratch. So what this means is you can go to all the work of creating an amazing business or an amazing product, but if you've got poor paperwork, or your documentation about your company formation or about the legal status you work under isn't correct, there's a real risk that you might miss out either on business opportunities or investment. So it matters in a big way in terms of our work, and less formally, it also can impact how our networks are developed and, you know, the engagement we have with the industry generally. Okay. Now, there are two main parts to our reputation. We tend to talk most about the character side of it, but there's a competence element that we tend to forget. And this is the nice part, because this is the bit that we have total control over. And this is made up of the different blocks from our qualifications, our experience of working with our clients or within the company we work with, our ongoing CPD, and that builds up really nicely. And it's something that we have complete control over. The only time it becomes a potential issue is if we're changing career or moving to a different area where some of our experience might not be relevant. But apart from that, this is something that's locked and loaded, and something that we can take with us and show our credibility. On the character side, this is something that changes on a regular basis. It can change based on how we're perceived in our networks, how we turn up at events, how we engage with our community, and it can change even based on some of the social media work that we might be doing. Some of our posts may build engagement. Some other posts might not be quite so effective. The character side changes a lot, and it's the piece that we actually don't have a great deal of control over. We can influence it, we can't control it. In fact, there are three elements that influence how we're perceived. There are behaviors. So do we deliver what we say we're going to deliver? Do we pay our invoices? Do we engage in a credible way with our clients and our partner companies? Then there's our networks, where we choose to belong, what networks we're part of, and how we show up in those networks as well. And the last part is the narrative. In fact, there are two narratives. There's the narrative that we tell about ourselves, and much more effective are the narratives that others tell about us. So if you've ever got a referral from someone, or if you've been recommended by somebody for an opportunity, that's a sign that your narrative is incredibly strong and influential. And we talk a lot about, this issue about small talk, or as Robert Dunbar calls it here, tittle tattle. It's actually rather more important than we might make out. I unfortunately wasn't able to attend the in-person CIOL conference a few weeks ago, but I was reading through the LinkedIn posts from some of the people who were there, and all the social activities around the conference and meeting up with people that we might not have seen for a while. And I'm sure in those discussions, as well as the social aspect, there were discussions around, what opportunities are coming up, what we might be focusing on over the next 6 to 12 months, what opportunities we might see on the horizon for a possible partnership, or indeed, some comments about companies that are worth working with or others that should be avoided. So into this social aspect, there can be a whole lot of really useful dialogues taking place, even outside the more formal discussions. And when we talk about engagement and gossip and small talk and so on, it automatically brings us on to social media. A lot of our dialogues take place on the internet. And one of the things that certainly has been coming clear over the last few months, particularly from some of the media coverage of our attitudes to social media, is that in some ways, quite a few people are stepping away or reducing their engagement on social media. I see it, for example, with my students. I'm not breaking any confidences by saying that a lot of my journalism students are looking again at how they're building up the communities that they want, their community of readership, the community that they work in, and the role that social media has in all of that. So I just want to share a couple of quotes with you from very different publications that have come out in the last 12 months that certainly gave me some food for thought. The first one was this one, this article from the New Yorker, which coined the term posting zero, which talks about the fact that a lot of people may be getting a bit tired of the noise, friction, the exposure of posting on social media. I find social media a really valuable tool for not just for marketing, but for engaging with people. But certainly there is this message coming through that perhaps a large part of our community might actually have had enough. And if posting zero is an issue, this term, curated invisibility, was coined in a very different publication. This is Elle Magazine's India edition, where they talked about Gen Z's attitude towards social media. It's interesting to see these anecdotes, to see how they play out over the coming few months, to see, is there indeed a trend that's happening or that's speeding up, or are these just examples that show certain parts of the population might be considering changing their activity on social media. So as I say, from a professional point of view, social media has a huge value, but we would be wrong to ignore some of the other commentary that might be going on around it as well. Okay. And then we have this issue about AI. And AI is taking things to a new level. In some ways, it's actually making it easier It's making it easier in terms of being able to process data, to make forecasts, to understand better public reaction to various issues. And as I say, a lot of the data-driven insights can be really valuable. One of the things, of course, it's also doing is it's taking control out of human hands and putting it into the hands of the AI applications. Reputation management has gone through a series of trends and phases. So if we go back to William Shakespeare's time, if you had a reputation issue, you could simply leave where you were living and go and move somewhere else where nobody knew you. For a lot of the time after that, even up to the last 20 or 30 years, you could try to manage an issue or take control of a bad reputational issue because there were so few publications, newspapers, TV stations that you needed to engage with to manage the issue or to try to control it. We've recently moved into kind of a multi-channel area where you've got all the social media channels, and you've got the physical world publications as well. You've got podcasts that you're trying to manage reputations across. So there was a real multi-channel trend for a number of years. And now we have got this issue with AI. And what AI is doing is it's making it critical for those of us, regardless of what area of the language services industry we're in, to be much more aware and much more proactive, because this is now, through the technology that's available, meaning that it's not just traditional media, it's not just a limited number of outlets that we need to be thinking of, but the coverage that AI the ability of AI to cover such a huge range of publications means that it may not anymore apply the same weighting to what appeared in traditional media as before. So it's really important for us to be aware of what's going on. I just want to show a couple of examples with you about where things have gone wrong before I talk to you about where things have gone right. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of Jessie Yendall. She's from Pontypridd in Wales, and she's a campaigner. She's a campaigner for people with speech impediments. She has about 3 million followers on social media, and she communicates with her audience through a range of TikToks that she puts out on a regular basis. So she raises awareness of this issue in some incredible ways, like going through situations which are difficult for somebody with a speech impediment. So she will, for example, film herself going through a drive-through restaurant to place an order, or going to a city or town where she doesn't know her way around and having to engage with people to ask them, or obviously using things that are difficult for people with a speech impediment, like telephone calls and so on. And she's putting out these regular TikToks with the aim of raising awareness on the basis that she hopes the UK will introduce a symbol for people with speech impediments to wear, so that when they're engaging with people, people will be able to give them a bit more time to communicate. So an incredible campaign that she's running. Now, the story that I want to tell you doesn't actually involve Jessie Yendall. It concerns two organizations who saw her TikToks last July. And this is a classic example of what happens when we don't do our research before posting on social media. There were two very large sporting organizations, and they didn't quite realize who she was or what her campaign was about. They actually went and added their own soundtrack to her post. And guess what happened? A BBC News reporter ended up contacting both organizations to ask why they had done this. Now, needless to say, they both apologized. In fact, both of their responses were exemplary. But the damage, of course, had been done. They ended up in a BBC News article. And they also ended up in my journalism course syllabus because this is a real issue about what happens when journalists don't do research before posting anything. So this is an example where something can go really wrong, something that you might be planning with the best of intentions, but without doing the adequate research before it happens, things can end up becoming a real big reputational issue. On a much longer framework was this, the demise of Sabena, which played out over several very difficult weeks in 2001. Sabena, as many of you know, was Belgium's national airline, and the terrorist attacks in the United States in September 2001 also led to major changes in the airline industry after it. One of the things that happened was a number of European airlines with very, how should I put it, very difficult, that were in a difficult financial situation, found it almost impossible to continue. Sabena was one of them. And the issue that many people remember from this tragedy isn't the issue about the airline going bankrupt. It is the few weeks that happened before Sabena finally went out of business in 2001. It went out of business in October. And one of the things that has become one of the stories, one of the iconic stories about Sabena's demise is the story of the cabin crew on transatlantic flights serving cold sandwiches to business class passengers in the number of weeks before the airline finally finished operating. So this is an example of a crisis and a reputation issue that goes on for weeks. It's usually a disaster if a reputation issue lasts more than 48 hours. This is an example of where it lingered and lingered and lingered, and this is something that you definitely do not want to have happen. So what can we do to fix these issues? What might we want to consider about our own work, about our own language service business? Well, obviously, it might be useful to think about, do we have any skills gaps when it comes to reputation management and in particular crisis communications? It's not a question here of street smart versus book smart. It's a question of adding some more skills if necessary. If you have these skills or you have the resources available to call on in a crisis, so much the better. But I thought it would be useful just to run through some of the main points that would be worth considering. One of the things that really hit me when I left leaving for a multinational and went working freelance about 3 years ago was the fact that I was so incredibly on my own, certainly in the beginning. When I worked in a multinational, I had an amazing set of skilled resources that I really didn't kind of give a second thought to. People that I could call on a crisis if things were going wrong or if I needed support on any issue that I was working with. And these are some incredibly specialized departments within companies, which bring a different level to any crisis you may be facing. But as freelancers, it's not always that straightforward. It's not always that easy. We're doing lots of different things, and perhaps reputation management and crisis comms mightn't be top of the list at the moment. So when something goes wrong, we may not have the wherewithal to deal with it, or to deal with it as well as we might like to. Okay, but it doesn't have to be like this. There are some practices, there are some templates which we can use to make it a whole lot easier for us. One of the things that we need to think about when we look at reputation management, and particularly when there is a crisis, is that it's actually not just a crisis that's the issue. Just like this picture of a fabric with a tear in it, the tear can either just be limited or it can actually be a tear that destroys the whole fabric itself. A crisis is like an X-ray. It's an X-ray that shows up not just how good your communication skills are, but it shows up how well your company operates. And it shows up across, how resilient you are, how good your planning is, how good your advisors are, how well structured you are in terms of being able to take on the unexpected. And one of the things we need to think about is, how do we react in a crisis? I don't particularly like this quote, principally because nuance and complexity are key elements of a lot of the work that I do. But I take the point that the writers are making, that certainly in a crisis, complexity needs to be eliminated as much as possible, and simple, straightforward communication and messaging is exactly what's needed. So nuance, complexity are wonderful, except when something goes wrong. One of the things that I've noticed as I've been involved in both education and writing is that I've done a lot of copywriting work and taken quite a number of copywriting courses. I've yet to see one that actually teaches me how to manage risk. There's a whole set of writing skills that are required to manage potential risk situations. And I know that it's wonderful to know how to write web copy or thought leadership or lead gen copy or any blogs or whatever, but it's also important. Luckily, risk management was a major part of the work that I was doing at First Data, but it's rarely actually built into copywriting training. And it's something which I think is useful to have. And even though it's not necessarily something that's needed right away, it can certainly come in useful in the future. And what we mean by crisis communications is a strategy that enables us to protect our reputation when either a crisis or some disruption in our business happens. It can be something totally unexpected, like our internet line can go down, there may be a flooding in the area, there may be some kind of other difficulty that might impact our services to clients. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but it can cause disruption. And that is something that we need to be able to communicate with our clients with on a very swift and a very clear way. So if we're looking at managing crisis and using this to build out our skills with reputation management, things like clear and consistent messaging. How do we create crisis communication statements? There are templates for how to communicate in situations like this, which we should be aware of. We may need to create talking points and Q&As for use with either our clients or if we need to engage with the media, which was part of the reason I raised the case study right at the beginning. So media engagement skills are also something we should think about, being able to do media management. And just a couple of slides on things that you might want to consider. Some of you, particularly those in big organizations, may already have these scenarios in place already, which would make it easier. So things like who are the key members of the team that will be involved in a crisis and to manage the messaging. You cannot have the usual reporting lines. There needs to be a very, very small team who's involved in managing this. You need a strategy. You need a document, first of all, with everyone's contact details, the templates of approvals, the templates of the documents you're going to use, and you want to have that to hand all the time. And always useful to practice and to make sure everyone is briefed. And if you're a freelancer, well, then a couple of other things you might want to think about is, looking at what are the potential risks in the business that you're in, or things that might be coming down the line as issues you might want to be aware of. You might already have some of this support available through your insurance policies, your membership of associations, your accounting, your accountants or legal providers, legal service providers that you work with. And it would be worth particularly if you're working in an area where there's a high level of risk, or you're serving clients where there may be a risk element, to see is it worth investing in media training or crisis communications training. Often you can complete a session in a few hours or half a day, so it could be a very useful investment. And all of these preparations, hopefully you will never need them. But certainly from my experience, I've had quite a few ships run aground when I was doing this job. So I hope very much that that you don't experience this. But if you are, if it ever happens, I hope you have the support and you have the skills to deal with it. One of the things I just wanted to distinguish was between crisis communications, a crisis communication statement, and a press release. They're not the same thing. A crisis communication statement is simple, 1 or 2 paragraph statement that says what happened, how you're helping, what's going to happen next, and it's a document that can be used and updated anytime there is a new development in the crisis situation, something which can be really useful in keeping people on board. It's not a press release. There are no quotes. There's nothing that you would normally put into a press release, and the tone is usually very different. It's very matter of fact. Here's what's happening. Here's what we're doing to fix it. Okay, let's come back to that scenario I mentioned right at the beginning. I just wanted to talk to you briefly about the media because it's becoming something that a lot of people are doing for marketing. And there's also, as I say, a reputation management and a risk management element as well. There is a feeling, certainly among a lot of people, that it's something to be wary of, that you're just sitting at like these tennis players, waiting for the serve to arrive and you'll respond to whatever it is, but you don't know what's coming. I think it's important to realize that you can plan. You can actually have a strategy for how you deal with the media. You can have a plan for how you want to manage any of the engagement, whether it's podcasts, whether it's on radio, whether it's on television, or whichever channel you happen to be involved in. So just some key points. First of all, you should always have a plan and write down the 4 or 5 key points you want to make. Okay, you should always go into an interview with some idea of what you're going to say. And you can always ask, you can say, why are you inviting me to this interview? What are you going to ask? Or at least ask them to tell you how the interview is going to start by telling you what the first question is going to be. So you can always reach out and say, I've been invited to this interview. What do you want me to talk about? Give me some idea of the questions. Now, this is completely different if you get the questions in advance, but it's quite possible that you won't. It's also important to realize that you've got a lot of not so much power, but a lot of influence on the discussion, because it's quite likely the person interviewing you won't know a great deal about the subject. So if you can answer questions in a way that provides some likely follow-on that they will bite, journalists have a great way of listening to what the people they're interviewing are saying, so that they can take the discussion forward, and to do it in a subtle way that will take the discussion forward in a way that you may be beneficial or maybe easier for you to deal with. And of course, you will potentially get somebody who might be less than polite about the language industry or something else, and always bring it back to the points that you want to cover. This is just a brief example of stuff that will be covered if you do media training, and it is a really great investment to help raise the profile of both you and your business. So in conclusion, our reputations don't live in a vacuum. We have influence over a lot of our reputation. There's a large part that we don't. We need to be authentic, and we need to be clear when we're speaking or when we're sharing a narrative with someone. It's not really the sophistication that's the key element here. Yep, as I said, we're not in control of the reputation, so don't be under the impression that we are. And be careful about what signals we're sending out, and also then be aware of the value of the networks around you. I know there's a lot of talk about AI and technology. I don't believe yet that it's the biggest risk. I think we humans are more than capable of making a mess on our own. So that, I think, is everything. Thank you so much for being here.